Oh, what's this filter?
What, a cheese?
Coming up, I get interrogated by K2 Intelligence in New York.
We're going to provide some headlines to our transparency study.
And finally, we're going to look at Snapchat's product update from yesterday, which may put them in the lead of social apps. Okay, so before we get into the show, today is our 7th birthday. ID Comms.
It is.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy.
April Fool's Day, 2009.
It is. So we set the company up on April Fool's Day.
We did.
So we thought that was a perfectly appropriate day to launch the business. And it's nice to be back in the seat as well, because we haven't, I feel like it's been a long time since the two of us have done a show together. So anyway, special birthday episode. Mm-hmm. What have we got coming up? I'm going to talk a little bit to start with about an interview that I had with K2 Intelligence, which is the firm that's supporting the ANA's rebate assessment in the US market.
We're going to share with you some kind of top-line findings from our transparency study that we closed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and finally, you may not have failed to notice or seen the headlines regarding Snapchat's product update, which happened yesterday, which is getting quite a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. So we'll look into that and really think about what the implications and opportunities might be for marketers and brands with that update. All coming up on ID Comms Media Snack in just the time it takes to eat a sandwich.
Okay, first up, what it feels like to be interrogated by a corporate investigation firm. So K2, as we know, are partnering with Ubiquity and Firm Decisions in helping the ANA understand a little bit more about the rebate practices in the US. And when you were in New York a couple of weeks ago, you were interrogated. You put in brackets gently.
Gently, yeah.
It
was a nice experience.
By K2. So I mean, I think that's really interesting. What was that like? What was the line of their questioning?
Well, it's good. I mean, I had in mind that it would be like some CIA investigation, like interrogation. So I was kind of bracing myself. But of course, it's very nice, lovely people, really smart, just being expertly questioned by some smart lawyers. Really, that was kind of it. And we're just helping, obviously, with that study and the assessment that they're doing into the rebate market and broader than just rebates. But as a process, it's good. I mean, it's clearly really thorough, very well thought out, and for a company that, by their own admission, has zero knowledge of the media industry, having started working on this towards the back end of last year, they've clearly been very well briefed by their colleagues at the ANA and Ubiquity to understand the market, and they've clearly asked some very smart questions. The questions they were asking me I thought were really impressive. They showed real insight and understanding of the landscape. Yeah. And the biggest thing, I wrote a piece in Campaign magazine last week, so we'll provide a link to that, which kind of summarizes that experience and puts it in the context of the ANA study that's going on. But the thing that I thought that was the most reassuring was that they were equally asking questions about client-side marketers' behaviours, as much as they were about agencies. Right. So it was clear that this is not an agency witch hunt.
So it's
It's a kind of balance, because I think that reassured me that it's a balanced perspective, realising that to move forward or make progress in this space requires, this mutual understanding that we keep talking about, kind of greater trust and transparency on both sides in this area. And it's not just honing in or trying to identify, any negative or bad behaviours on the agency side.
That's good.
It's also saying, actually, it's holding marketers accountable. To work with their agencies in more transparent ways as well, which that was good.
Did they provide any suggestion as to when the report would be ready, or when? What are they going to do? Because there's the ANA conference in April, right? Which I think you're going to attend. Yeah. Is there an anticipation that there's going to be some big reveal?
Well, there was. That was the idea. That's why I was going,
Right.
really. This is the Advertising Financial Management Conference, which is a big A&A, mostly procurement conference. It's about 700 delegates that go. It's a really big deal. And I've been the last few years. It's really good. And I anticipated, and as I guess many people did, that at that conference would be where they do the big, kind of big reveal to members, because it was at that conference last year where they really kind of kicked off this initiative. From conversations that I've had with K2 and people around the A&A, it looks unlikely that they're going to be ready to publish in time. And actually, I don't think that they're yet clear exactly what publish means. There is obviously internal reporting that K2 will make to the A&A.
Yeah.
And then it's really up to the A&A to decide to what extent they want to share those findings with their members, whether they want to just issue some guidelines, whether they even make anything kind of more widely available. So we'll wait and see on that. I mean, I expect the outputs have to be quite specific guidelines for marketers. I think the A&A probably have to take a kind of a leadership position which balances the requirements of both the client and the agency, and it's not too confrontational.
Yeah, but this investigation was launched with great fanfare, and they were very definitive in what they were trying to find, and not least in engaging with K2 and their reputation within the marketplace. I think brands out there will be expecting some quite specific findings, and I'd imagine that they're waiting with bated breath for the A&A to come back to them with something a little bit more specific.
Yeah, exactly. So probably late May, early June for some form of announcement that may be made to the wider public. I don't think there's going to be a smoking gun, but hopefully there will be really, really constructive guidelines and also commitment on all sides to make sure that this is a practice, or anything around these kind of areas, which is not disadvantaging marketers.
Absolutely.
Okay, and they're able to work constructively and productively with their agencies, and that we can rebuild any trust that might be missing from the industry right now.
Absolutely critical. And as soon as we hear or see anything, we'll obviously mention it and reference it in one of these snacks.
Right, next up, continuing the theme really, because we're talking about trust and transparency. I think we've mentioned on a previous episode, I don't know which one that was, probably 14, 15, have a look. We'd launched a transparency survey back in February, which was an ID Comms initiative, which we sent out, and we had about 140 respondents.
It's a great collection of brands and marketeers.
Yeah, it's a very good response rate, and we were looking at the levels of trust that currently exist between marketer, stroke procurement, and their agencies. Whether transparency was a component of that, and if transparency was an issue, what is it that was driving concerns over lack of transparency? So we got those results in the beginning of March, and we're due to publish the findings the beginning of next week. That's so we'll be circulating that back out. If you'd like a copy of the report, please get in touch.
Some really strong insights that we got through from the results. The good news is that almost all of the brand marketers and procurement experts that we spoke to believe that a stronger relationship with their agencies would enable greater, better marketing performance. Okay, so that's the good news. The bad news is that 80% of the respondents believed that trust was at an all-time low. Unsatisfactory was the way that they described it. Even worse news, if you like, is that they don't expect that to improve in the next year. Yeah,
that's the bit I was surprised at. There's not much optimism really around improvements in trust.
And I'm not surprised at that, because the toxic nature of all of the news that is kind of surrounding the transparency kind of debate at the moment is, I think, just sort of dragging everybody down, and there doesn't seem to be any positivity about it. The two kind of key areas when we asked the respondents, which were the pressure points when it came to lack of trust. Not surprisingly, it was around rebates. And secondly, it was around the ambiguity in some cases of how the agency makes money.
And their relationship with media vendors, which is something that we've talked about before. So that's reflected very much in marketing and procurement thinking. there were some clear distinctions, as you know, unsurprisingly, some clear distinctions between the client side and the agency side. The agency is generally a bit more optimistic and positive. The marketers were not negative, but perhaps they just have a different point of view, and don't have as much faith perhaps in the levels of trust. But I mean, we'll publish it next week. We're taking that survey then into a client-only event, which we may have mentioned before. We're going to do in a couple of weeks in London. It's an invitation-only event, but if you'd like to apply, you can get in touch through the channel. And it's just for marketers and procurement leaders. And we're doing a panel. So
we've got a great panel there.
Partly based on the findings of the research, which have been really interesting. We just want to take that further and have a representative discussion across the industry. So who have we got? We've got some lovely names.
Yeah, we've got Bob Wootton, who is head of media at ISBA.
Yeah.
We've got Iain Jacob, who is the newly appointed European CEO of Publicis Media.
Yeah, so that'll be good. He's got a nice fresh new story to talk about.
Absolutely, and his perspective, I'd imagine, on the transparency issues and the principles that they put in place when they were designing the new blueprint for Publicis Media, I'm sure will have had transparency and trust at the very heart of it. So,
you'd hope so.
Well, you'd hope so.
Given that it's probably the biggest issue facing marketers right now.
So asking Iain perhaps to elaborate on that, I think, would be really interesting. We've got Adrian Jenkins, who's the founder of Financial Progression.
Yeah.
And we've got Max Raven, who is SVP of Sales, International Sales at CNBC.
Yeah. And we've also got a really interesting keynote as well, because we've got a fantastic chap called William Mez, who's one of the analysts at Nomura International, which is an investment bank, and they do a lot of advisory. We've talked about them before because we sometimes go in and we have breakfast with Will and some of his investor groups, just talking about much bigger macro perspective. And I think Will's setup, his keynote, is going to be fascinating for those that come, because he and people like him see our funny little industry from this 35,000 foot view in a way that we don't often talk about. From a large scale investor's perspective, where they see the future of the advertising and the marketing community and the business.
And you've got to remember that this industry has posted stellar results for the last 4 or 5 years. So getting his perspective from a macro point of view, I think will be really interesting. And I think it's going to set the context for the discussion really nicely.
Yeah.
And finally, one of your favourite apps, Snapchat.
Yeah.
They've come to market with 2 new product innovations, which you're particularly impressed with.
Well, yeah, they are. I mean, it's made quite a lot of news the last 24 hours. Snapchat, which is some kind of social messaging app, I suppose. It was originally people sending photos to each other, but it turned into a kind of chat app now. Its point of difference, and probably one of the main reasons for its continued success, is they have about 100 million active users, 8 billion views a day of video content,
that is crazy,
which is quite phenomenal. But the big thing about Snapchat, if you're not familiar with it, recommend you go and have a look at it. But content is not stored. Okay, so at most it lasts 24 hours, and so it just presents an entirely different social experience, and it makes us, all this kind of vanity and narcissism that we get through managing our own, reputations and profiles and perceptions through, our Facebook profiles and our particularly Instagram, which is a bit over manicured and all that. Snapchat content doesn't last, so it's just a bit more human. So it's always been quite a nice feature of Snapchat. It perhaps always had potential to do very well. And it's been very successful with a teenage audience because of that. Perhaps, I don't know, to get too deep and meaningful, but perhaps because, younger people have kind of, they're figuring out their own identity, and it just worked for them, and they can experiment in Snapchat. But the user base has grown now, and there are 2 really significant rollouts of products. One which happened last year, which is when I started to kind of think actually it really starts to be interesting. As a user, it starts to be interesting. And that's a thing called Stories, which gathers together all of your snaps and your video, and they launch a video rather than just still photography. but it gathers together that in a little story which lasts for 24 hours. So you can basically view somebody's last 24 hours. And that's just quite an interesting thing. And that's grown users, and I think that's just made it slightly older. It's really good functionality. And then there's a thing called Live, which is a bit like a Twitter hashtag. It just gathers together lots of content from lots of different users, but around a particular theme. And because Snapchat are curating that, they started selling ads in it.
Right, okay.
But it's content, they have to approve of the content that goes in the ad. But that's really clever. What they've become very good at, Snapchat, is thinking really clever commercially.
Yeah.
Not just building their user base, but also in parallel, they seem to be really on how to start to monetize the audience side by side.
And they're looking to develop the kind of ads that go on Snapchat. So they're allowing the customization of these ads based on the profile of the.
Well, there's that. So I mean, this was part of the rollout yesterday. So yesterday, two big things happened. One is that Snapchat launched some new functionality, which we won't really dwell on here because I mean that's really more user focused. But it puts them in a very strong position. It's bringing together chat functionality. It's basically bringing together the existing Snapchat functionality with a messaging app like WhatsApp, with a video call app like a FaceTime or whichever one you might use. And so people can switch between different methods of communication incredibly easily within one screen, which is a really nice step forward. It means that you don't have to keep backing in and out of different apps. And that will keep people's attention within Snapchat, and then hopefully they'll use other functionality, and therefore that's what Snapchat are looking to monetize. The other thing that they did yesterday was they changed the terms and conditions, as a lot of these apps have to do at some point, to say we might serve you ads that will be targeted based on your user data. So that was inserted yesterday in the terms and conditions. Obviously that little bit of text was slightly overshadowed by the excitement of the chat features, and so there's not much attention being paid to that. But it's significant because it means that Snapchat can perhaps start to use and leverage user data, which they haven't really exploited to date. And they've been very proud of the fact that they are very pro-user and very sensitive to spamming with advertising. But now they have a right, if you continue to use the service, to collect and potentially use some of your user information.
Because traditionally you could only geo-target or age target on Snapchat, right? So, you know, the cynics amongst us might say that this is a strategy to allow them to go after slightly larger digital budgets, to go after the budgets that predominantly are given to Facebook and Google. Right?
And that's it. I mean, I think it's a very intentional move. The product rollout is definitely designed to steal time away from Facebook's Messenger app. And the change in the terms and conditions, as you say, allows them to compete with some of these other larger apps like a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to better customize that opportunity for marketers. And the founders have said that they will be very sensitive to their user base when it comes to monetizing them and advertising. So we'll see. They will start rolling out increased marketing opportunities. Okay, before we go this week, as we said, it's our birthday today. We are going to do next week a media snack where David and I will just do Q&A, and we're going to answer questions. We've been receiving some questions about the business. And so, ask us any questions about why we do what we do, how we do it, how we run the business.
Our perspective on the industry.
So submit questions either below this, or you can submit them on Twitter @IDComms. But that's it for this week's episode. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.
Have a good weekend.